Hello, welcome back to today's requested videos from one of my patrons. We are going to make our very own dyed crinkle seam binding. This is a very easy process and it's been done a million times before. This is really not something I invented. However, it was requested of me and I might have some tips or tricks that you haven't thought of, and I'm going to show you a few different ways that I like to use the crinkle seam binding. And I have a couple that are just drying right here and it's a little hard to see on camera, but this one's kind of like a cotton candy. It's a purple, pink, kind of bluish color. I accidentally got some of the green on it, but I actually liked how that looked. I have this tangerine color and then this green, which is just, I love this for like botanical type journals. So we're going to make some of those today. I'm gonna show you how to make like your custom colors and how to use a couple different products here. You don't have to use exactly what I'm using, but I will have links below for those things. Okay, so we're going to use the Hug Snug seam binding. I like this because it's on a roll. I've used different seam binding that was like on like a card and it just had kinks in it that I thought were hard to get out. Got this from Amazon and it's a ton. Like, you'll never have to buy this again. I'm going to use Distress Oxide ink pads and I'm going to use sprays. And then it's also a good idea to have some type of a plastic working area or something you can clean up rather easy, and some type of a drying tool. Anyways, I'm going to use gloves too because I have already been dyeing my hands and I'm going to try to avoid that. I'm just going to go ahead and cut a little piece off because I want to show you a few different colors. Otherwise, it really does make sense to do a bunch at once so that you will have some on hand. So I like to get started by actually putting my seam binding in water. If you could use a spray bottle if you want to have a little extra control with the water amount, but I don't have one near, so this is also going to help give that crinkle look by having this super wet. And then what we can do is start by, let me show you with the ink pads. Now I'm going to say that in my experience, using ink pads gives you a little bit of a lighter look. So if you want a more muted tone or a more kind of pastel look, that's what I would suggest, is using a ink pad. Not to say you can't get a light color from these spray inks, but you're gonna have to water it down a bit and kind of just experiment from there. And I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of water on top of this. Again, a spray bottle is kind of nice so that you don't have to do what I'm doing like this. And then you're really just going to get your seam binding right into that color. And I just kind of roll it around in the color and then just kind of pull it through. There's really no rhyme or reason to doing this correctly. I did turn the overhead light off because it was giving such a bad glare. So again, this color that I'm specifically using is also a very light color. So, you know, I'm not gonna expect too dark of a color, but once it's dry, you'll really see the purple. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more. Now, I love adding a little bit of blue with this color because, like I was saying, it gives it kind of like a tie-dye or bubblegum kind of cotton candy look. But we're gonna let this one dry. It's hard to see in my gloves, in my gloved hands, but we'll set it aside and then at the end we'll dry these. I'm gonna start out doing the same thing, and I'm still using that purple color just to start out. But then we're gonna add in a little bit of blue. So I like to really soak up as much of that color as I can. Now, also by rolling it around crinkled up like this, that's also going to give you a very varied coloring on your seam binding, meaning it's not going to all be one tone across the entire thing. I like that look a lot. If you don't, go ahead and straighten your string out and then I would pull it through. But I personally like how it kind of gives it a little varied look. Okay, so now that we did that, we're gonna take one more color. I'm gonna take the Broken China and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna add just a little bit of water on top of this color right here, just to kind of tone it down a little bit so that it's not too dark. So you can see that by adding a certain amount of water, that really helps tone it down a little bit too for any of those darker colors. Now for this one, I'm not gonna soak up the whole color. I'm just kind of stamping it in there. Look, so now let's move on to the sprays. So the sprays are definitely a lot more intense in color. I'm just gonna go ahead and spray one little spray just on my little working surface. Now, if you want that bold of a color, you don't have to add water, but I'm gonna add a tiny bit. And once again, I'm gonna dip my seam binding into the water here. And then I'm just gonna soak up this color. And this just soaks up super fast and easy because it's a liquid. And so it just soaks right into that seam binding. And if you do this and you're like, oh, that's a bit too dark, then you can go ahead if you want and stick it into your water. I don't keep it in there for too long because, you know, I want to keep some of that color, and you can really just use this water now to dye some of your seam binding, but you can already see that that gives a really pretty toned down orange look. So we're gonna set this aside, and again, we'll dry all of these together so you can see how crinkly they get. And then I'm going to go ahead and keep that little bit of extra orange. It's spiced marmalade, by the way. And I'm gonna add a little bit of this. This is an ink spray by Delusions, and this is a lot darker. It's bubblegum pink. But I'm just gonna show you how you can kind of mix and match colors. We'll just kind of, this is gonna give it more of a coral look because of that orange. Squeeze that out, and that's a really pretty pink color there. So we'll set that aside. So this next color I wanted to show you, it's called Peeled Paint, and again, it's the Oxide spray. This color is just really cool because it almost has several different colors that you can see depending how you see it in the light. So we're gonna go ahead, and I'm actually gonna spray this right onto my seam binding here. So instead of adding any water, you can do this as well. Then I'm just gonna soak that up. And I'm gonna crinkle that up as well. So that's another option for if you want a little bit of a bolder color. And this color is just amazing. So let's go ahead and dry all of our seam binding now. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my heat tool. Now obviously these have sat here a little bit because I've been filming, so they're already starting to dry a bit, but basically I'm just gonna turn this on. It's gonna be a little bit loud, and I'll just kind of dry it and crinkle as we're drying. Now let's take a closer look at the final results. So this one is the Delusions Bubblegum Pink Ink Spray. Really pretty. These two are that Cotton Candy blend, which is just my favorite. This is one that I made earlier, and I got a little bit of green on it, but I think you can see much better once they're dry. And that was using a combination of the 2 Distress Oxides in Broken China and Milled Lavender, in case you want to try to get this same result. These two are the same color. It's the Spiced Marmalade, but I just diluted this one a little bit more with water, so you can see that even with one color, you can get a very different result depending on how much water you use. So this is the Distress Oxide spray in Spiced Marmalade. And then these two right here. And I hope that you can see on camera how cool this color is. There's almost like orange tones. I'm not sure, but it's really cool. And that was all just one color. And then this was just one that I used to kind of clean up the area. And so it's just kind of a muted color. And then here we go. This was just the milled lavender by itself. And so again, you can see when we were working with this color, it's very light and almost seemed like it would be white. But if I compare it to the white color, you'll see that there's quite a bit of color there. It's just a pastel version. So that is it, guys. It's just a very simple process and really, really fun, but very cool because you can also, you know, custom make colors that you need to match your projects that you're working on. And I mentioned a couple ways that I would show a couple ways that I like to use seam binding. One is the obvious right here, just as tag toppers, because it just is so gorgeous and could finish off just the plainest tag. Another thing that I really like making is layered embellishments, and I love using the crinkle seam binding. This is a blue and white kind of mixture back here. That's one of the pieces that I used on this embellishment. And then I also really love to use crinkle seam binding as closures on my journal. This journal obviously has a lot of different trims and things, but you can kind of just see I like to use these in all kinds of different ways, and as a journal closure would be another fun idea. So I hope that you guys got something out of this video, and I think that's all for today. So I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.